feel free as you're joining us to continue to add value in the chat as you respond to that joining question. I know everyone is eager for this conversation tonight, but I want to first lay some norms, a couple of ground rules as we begin our discussion tonight. The chat feature, as you see, is open. Feel free to share openly and, most importantly, respectfully. This presentation will be recorded. We will have time at the end for question and answer. We'll provide an opportunity for you to pose questions throughout. Feel free to continue the conversation on social media using the hashtag #CoreAdvocates, and be sure to tag Achieve the Core. Lastly, cyberbullying is not permitted. Anyone engaging in any form of cyberbullying will be promptly removed. Now, what you've all been waiting for and been eagerly anticipating, I would like to welcome to the conversation Rachel Ruffalo from the Education Trust West. Let's give Rachel a round of applause virtually. Let's throw out some hand claps. Welcome, Rachel. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for everyone for your virtual and visual welcome. I am doing great today. How are you?
I am super excited. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge this is Women's History Month. And we definitely want to thank you for being here and everyone for your contributions and just celebrating this Women's History Month. It is exciting to be here with you.
Great. Thank you so much. And happy Women's History Month to you too.
Now, let's jump into this discussion, this coffee and conversations. I remember when this toolkit was first released, I thought this was the best thing since sliced bread. I was super excited. I was like, where has this been my career and my life? And I was forwarding the toolkit to lots of friends. I've been in conversations. I've been telling different colleagues about the toolkit. It has been one of the, in my opinion, one of the most impactful pieces and resources put in the field. And you can download the toolkit at equitableMath.org. EquitableMath.org, you see it on the screen. Rachel, let's just jump right into it. Why was a Pathway to Equitable Mathematics Instruction Toolkit created?
Yeah, thank you so much for that warm affirmation of the work. I remember when we first spoke about it, and I was just so humbled by the enthusiasm that you and your team had for the toolkit, because really we initially were targeting our educator audience in California. And so we were, so we've been just completely overblown by the interest that's, we've been hearing from folks, not just all over the country, but all over the world. We've been getting inquiries and comments. And so it just kind of defied our expectations in terms of the interest and the not just interest, but the desire for folks to have tools like this in their hands. So to your question about how did this get started, what was the point of it? So originally we were, so at Trust West, we are a research and advocacy organization in California. We work and partner with educators, but we're not content developers. We don't provide professional development, but we convene people, and we like to bring together folks that don't necessarily be in conversation together naturally. And we have been really trying to be thoughtful about our policy advocacy, that it be grounded in the needs of the field, that we listen really intently and closely to educators, to families, to students. And we want to make sure that we can support the development of tools, curriculum tools, whatever, that aligns with the policy, and that the policy helps to uplift the instructional practices that we're hearing from researchers and educators that are the ones that we need to really serve our students well. I should also note that we are an advocacy organization that's focused on racial equity. We explicitly aim to for educational justice for Black, Latinx, multilingual students and low-income students in California. And so early in the pandemic, we were approached by a funder who asked if we'd be interested in bringing together some collaborators in California to develop some tools to help teachers make strategic instructional decisions. Because back then, we were kind of operating under the assumption that, we lost and disrupted learning in the spring, but that we had the summer to kind of gear up for the fall. And there was concern from many of the folks that we were in conversation with about we didn't want this to be a moment of regression, or we fought so much in many spaces against remediation and pulling students out of grade level content to try to fill these gaps. We wanted to ensure that all of our students still had equitable access to high quality, rigorous instruction, but we knew that teachers were going to need to make some strategic instructional decisions. So when we brought together a group of folks with this mission over the summer, we wanted to make sure that what we developed was equity focused. And so we had focal groups in mind. We're focusing on Black, Latinx, and multilingual learners for this tool. And we were also encouraged by our funder to have a grade band in mind for the focus of being able to provide examples. So we focused on middle school. And we brought together an amazing team of collaborators. These are people from 25 different educational organizations in California and outside of California, classroom teachers, professional development providers, university professors, researchers, people who are developing professional development for teachers, and I should say majority people of color. And we brought this group together, and where we felt like we needed to start was not just with the pandemic and the moment that we're in now, but really taking a bigger step. And the first question was, what are our students experiencing in math right now? And what are the biggest barriers to equity? And from that question, we, had this whole list of barriers to equity. And some of them were instructional. Some of them were structural, like placement policies and how teachers are assigned and things like this. And some of them were cultural. They were kind of beyond just what is written in a policy or what is an instructional practice, but really and I'll name we were naming racism as a barrier itself, and that racism is everywhere. It infuses all aspects of our life, and sometimes in ways that is almost difficult to name. And so we determined that itself was a barrier, and we could come up with all the great instructional methods and curricular materials, but if we're not attempting to at least reflect and name the racism that exists in all of our systems, then we may end up right where we started at the end. We may have made some small strides, but not the big enough strides that we really need to make, and to ensure that all of our students have true, meaningful access to experience the beauty of math. And all of the things I was reading in the chat that the folks in the room were saying what they love about math, that's the kind of love and experience that we want for all of our students in our mathematics classrooms. So I'll pause there because I know that there's probably some follow-up questions and things that we're going to go dig deeper into.
You all see now, while we brought Rachel on for this coffee and conversations, there is so much to dig into this toolkit. And I saw a post in the chat where it talks about racism, the uncomfortable truth. And we're going to dig into that a little bit later in our discussion. But that's something we have to grapple with. We have to make sense of. And most importantly, we have to address it. And when we think about addressing it, one of the ways we can address it is through the lens of education, through the lens, which is my favorite subject, disclaimer, is mathematics. It can be addressed through the lens of mathematics. And as Rachel pointed out, I want to bring us back to the first point that Rachel made. It's about serving students. This toolkit's sole meaningful focus is on the students in which we serve. As we have our discussion tonight, I want us to take a moment and just think about the students who are under your purview. Think about those bright and smiling faces. Think about all the things that they bring into an environment. And how do we use math to unlock what is inside them? And you mentioned a couple pieces, but I want to look at this point with this equity. That's a big piece when we look at these various student groups and thinking about the student groups that we're focused on. We know from the data that the student groups that have been focused on for the toolkit, Black students, LatinX students, and multilingual students, they receive a different educational experience. And some are saying, well, Chris, you're just saying it. We look at the data. When you look at the data, you can easily predict which groups of students are going to do well and which group of students are not going to do well, which is something that equity is intended to address. I want to follow up with you, Rachel. What does equitable math instruction look like in the classroom? This is an equitable toolkit. So what does this look like in the classroom?
Yeah, great question. So definitely there's lots of layers, right, when we talk about equity and math, and there's lots of issues of access that have to do with which students are in schools that are offering courses that are rigorous, high quality courses, which students have access to instructional materials that are high quality, which students have access to credentialed and experienced teachers who receive excellent professional development. And we know that there's disparate experiences just on those kind of structural pieces that have to do with the access. But for this toolkit, our focus was teachers, and teachers oftentimes do not have power over, how our state allocates resources to schools, or how their districts determine their budgets, and how teachers are assigned to students. There's lots of things that are not within the immediate control of an individual teacher. However, there is a lot that a teacher does have control over, and that has an opportunity to really influence. And that's the instruction and the relationship that they forge with students in their classes. And so this toolkit is really helping to support those parts of a teacher's life and work that they can really embrace. And so the toolkit, like I said, it's designed around these 5 barriers. The first one is focused on this dismantling racism in mathematics instruction. And I think we're going to go really deep into that one, but I also just want to name that there's these 4 other strides that also I think are really good companions to that stride 1, because they help to provide some more like examples of anti-racist practices in a classroom setting. So stride 2 focuses on using student discourse and dialogue around process to build conceptual understanding, and really recognizing the value of answers that are not the expected answers, but the exploration to look at those answers really helps to uncover a lot of thinking. The third stride is focused on creating a learning environment that is mindful of students' social, emotional, and academic development. And it has very specific teacher moves that can be done in service of creating those environments. The fourth stride is really focused on integrating language development within the context of a math classroom. And that type of scaffolding is one of the anti-racist practices that is called out in stride 1. And so stride 4 really helps to kind of dig deeper into that practice. And then stride 5 is the stride that is focused on coaches and administrators. So it's also a good companion because it provides a coaching structure to support a teacher or a team of teachers in their own personal and professional growth. And so it just offers a really nice couple of different options for what a coaching relationship could look like with some good tools to help facilitate that. So I don't know that that totally answered your question about what it looks like in the classroom, but we can go more into the Stride 1 if that is where we want to go.
What you did was blew my mind. I want everybody to check this out. This is a book within a book. When you think about there are 5 different strides. The first one gets the most attention, which we're going to go there. I know a lot of folks are waiting for those questions, but there are 5 different strides. So I definitely I'm going to plug equitableMath.org. Go and check out their 5 different strides. No matter where you are in your mathematics career, there's a stride for you. I personally, and I'm going early in the conversation, I like definitely stride 1. Also like stride 5 from a leadership perspective and helping leaders and create these different structures. But you mentioned something earlier. You said teachers do not control budgets. And that is key. But I'm going to posit something tonight. I think teachers should control budgets. I think when education decisions are made, teachers should be in the room and not just making decisions, but controlling the budget. If you agree, type yes in the chat. Teachers should be a part of the budgeting process. Take this clip, send it to politicians, send it everywhere. Teachers should be a part of the budgeting process because too often we place these different barriers on our teachers and we expect them to win. When, again, teachers are doing amazing things. Students are doing amazing things. I saw in the chat, parents should also be on there and students. But we have to figure out, and we know ways to eliminate some of these barriers and ultimately ensure students have access. That onus is on us. As mathematics educators, providing each and every student a high quality math experience. And that math experience can truly, for a lot of kids, I don't think we understand, change their life. It can be just an eye-opening experience. I want everyone to think for us when you fell in love with mathematics or when mathematics became something to you. Think about that moment, how it just changed your perception, it changed your world. And what we're trying to do through using this toolkit is provide students that same experience, that same love, that same beauty. And some of you are saying, Chris, but a lot of people don't like math. I guarantee you, people love math. They may not like it in the context because we've restricted it. We've restricted math to be just a formula, to be a give me a quick answer, and not unpacking the beauty and joy of what mathematics can be and what it can do. And unpacking the beauty and joy, it starts with that stride 1. Mm-hmm. And stride 1 says dismantling racism in mathematics instruction. I want to pause there for a minute. When I first read this title, I said, whoa, math is racist. Whoa, but then I reread it. It doesn't say math is racist. It says dismantling racism in mathematics instruction. 2 different things I want our audience to really pay attention to. I know my reading teachers in the audience, they're thinking like, look at the keywords, look at the structure. It's not saying math is racist, but we're talking about this instruction. So I want you to help us understand, because the claim is always made, math is racist. But I don't believe stride 1 is saying mathematics is racist. Give me some more background on stride 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy you asked that question because, we have heard some commentary that's what this is saying, and clearly they haven't read it, if that's the takeaway. The folks who wrote this stride and the entire toolkit, they love math. They're like the people in this room. They want to share the joy and beauty of mathematics with their students because they know that math can be this wonderful tool to make meaning of the world and to describe the world around us. And it also creates a lot of wonderful opportunities for ongoing learning and careers. And so absolutely, it's not math. No one is saying that math is racist. What we're saying is that math classrooms, like every other system in our society, is impacted by our dominant culture. And in the United States, for centuries, our dominant culture has it's a white supremacy culture. And I know that term is like new for people. And the idea of white supremacy culture isn't saying it's not against white people. It is recognizing an ideology that has centered the experiences and contributions of white people over people of color. And when we look at other systems and other organizations, there has been for like 20 years, there's a framework that people have been referring to, which is the characteristics of white supremacy culture. It's Jones and Akun. It is widely cited by lots of people as they examine organizations and name the characteristics that are associated with white supremacy culture. And the problem isn't necessarily just the characteristics, it's that we're not stopping to reflect on why we are upholding these characteristics, because the people in the organization maybe haven't decided that these are the characteristics that they want to uphold, or that these are the characteristics that reflect the values of the people in the organization. And so the concept of having this framework is really one that is helping to asking us to pause and to name what is dictating our culture, and then to collectively decide if that is what is best for the people of the organization. So what the folks who wrote Stride One did was that they adapted this framework to a math classroom, looking at a math classroom as an organization in and of itself. So it's pretty groundbreaking, I think, in that way, because this is new. It was a new application of an existing framework. And so the language and the terminology is from this framework. And so one of the first few pages in the toolkit does say, that's where we recommend you start, because that is where all of this terminology came from. And so if you just went, a couple of pages in and saw some words and it didn't make sense, I encourage you to go back and read through it again and read that article by Jones and Akun and read through the framework, and then see that this is the point of using that framework is to visibilize, and that was a term that was new to me, but it's to name what it is that we have come to accept as the norm in classrooms. And maybe it's not what you've come to accept in your classroom. Maybe you've already named it and dismantled it, and instead you're using anti-racist practices already. But we know that so many classrooms and so much of math instruction is still really dominated by this kind of narrow approach to mathematics that has been the norm for a really long time. And what we do know that it isn't working for a lot of students. And so we're not okay with the status quo and just saying, well, that's math. No, we really feel that this is an opportunity, this disruption in time that we're all experiencing. It's actually the perfect opportunity to pause and look at what we're doing, and why we're doing it, and question it. And to not only do that, but then to also think of what we could be doing differently that opens up education to be more inclusive of more students.
Rachel, I got to take a sip of coffee on that one. First, I want to reiterate one point to everyone. You have to read the strides cover to cover. That's the first thing. You can't read just the title page or just, a lot of us remember in college, the Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes are still probably popular. You can't just read that version. You need to take a moment to read through the entire strides. But second, this white supremacy culture, I really want to unpack that for a moment of what are we talking about when we say decentering and using these terms that most people have never heard of. You haven't been taught these things. I want everyone for a moment to imagine a circle, all right? Imagine a circle and that everyone's identity is on the outer edge of that circle. When everyone is placed on the outer edge of that circle, everyone now has equal access to the middle. You're math folks. You know about that. So when you have that equal access to the middle, that's what is meant when you hear the word decentering. It's not saying eliminate anything. It's not saying in some circles eliminate white people. That is not being said. What it is saying is decenter white supremacy culture from the middle and the heart and put everything on the outer edge. That way every student gets equal access. And then looking at it through this, I love how you paint a picture of a mathematics classroom as an organization. If a classroom is going to be an organization, everyone should have equal access within their organization. Everyone should have equal opportunities within their organization. And when you think about and hear decentering or white supremacy culture, what it's trying to do is every student should see themselves a part of the conversation, a part of the mathematics. Think about this for a moment. Take a mental walk through your educational environment as a student. As they come into your building, do they see themselves? And pick any student. How do they see themselves represented throughout the school day? Through the textbook materials, the picture on the wall, through the music, through the activities. And then look at it through the lens of what students see themselves throughout the entire day, and then what students never see themselves represented throughout the entire day. When we look at this piece of dismantling racism in mathematics instruction and really in education, that's what we want to do, is create this environment where every student can come into this environment and say, I belong here. I see myself. I feel valued. The teacher sees me. The mathematics task that we're using, I am seen within the task. And it goes back to how the toolkit was created. I'm going to challenge our audience. The toolkit was created by a diverse group of voices. How diverse are your decision makers in your environments? When you change who are the decision makers and you have this diverse group of voices, it changes the outcome that we get. And that's something within the white supremacy culture. Folks get like on edge. It's not eliminating, it's adding more to it. That way, when we get this diversity of thought, this diversity of voices, we can recreate something new, something actually better. And when I say better, so every student can feel as though they're a part of something, as opposed to students now literally finding their ways to see, am I in this? And you mentioned something, Rachel, and we're going to stick with stride one just a little bit more with this dismantling racism. And this is essentially, Rachel, we're having like a beautiful discussion, and it's like a master class that you don't get in a regular setting. How often do folks get to talk about these things in an educational environment as adults and professionals? And then definitely we rarely have these within our school environments. So Rachel, I want to go a little bit deeper with you of this whole concept of race and racism in mathematics. What does that have to do with mathematics, race and racism?
Yeah, so as we were talking about before, that racism is, and we've borrowed some terminology from Race Forward, and we have an FAQ document also I want to note for folks on the website that gets into some of these questions too, and provides some of the resources and citations that we've used when we were putting together this document. And the idea of how we see racism intersecting with mathematics is the centering of access for some, and not interrogating why. And so we have outcomes that are predictable along lines of race in mathematics, in many outcomes, and not just like outcome metrics, but also access metrics, like students that are even taking advanced math courses. And so with our outcomes being racialized, we cannot solve the problem without having a race-conscious solution. Like, I think for a long time, folks wanted to kind of skirt the issue of racism and in math and in many other areas. And let's just focus on good instruction. Let's just focus on good materials. But we cannot be race blind, because we're in a very racialized society and very racialized culture, and we're all bringing our own biases to our relationships, to our interactions with our students and our families. And like I said, we are all kind of living in a culture that has been dominated by a white culture. And it's just a call to be aware of how racism has permeated our systems, our biases, and how those interact. And we cannot change them unless we acknowledge them. And I wanted to just point out, I saw on the Twitter kind of plug for this event that you included the quote from Dr. Ibram Kendi, which is also in Strike One. The only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it, and then dismantle it. And when to see it written out so clearly, like, that makes perfect sense.
And we think about this racism, this whole construct of it, and this whole construct of race that was created is something we need to be willing to challenge, and we need to be willing to address. We live in a race-based society. We can look at the color of someone's skin, or what we assume to be the color of their skin, and we can make predictions of essentially how that person's life is going to turn out. That should not be the case. The same thing in our mathematics classrooms. If you give me a list of all the students in your school, give me their racial identity or ethnicity identity, you give me their socioeconomic status, without knowing anything else about the students, I can tell you how your students are going to perform. We should not be able to do that. It should be a smorgasbord of students across the board and how they're performing and doing amazing things. But we have to acknowledge, first we have to acknowledge we have an unjust system. We have a system that was not created for every student. And then some are going to push back on us, Rachel, and say, whoa, this is an equitable educational system. Just think back in your minds. When was this version of the educational system created? Who was able to go to school? It was mainly created initially in this version. I say this version because the indigenous populations had an educational system that was awesome beforehand. But this version, when we think about the Boston Latin School, was created for white males. And then it was created essentially for these factory jobs. That's what our system is based upon. And we've never thought to, today, we're doing a lot of the same practices for when it was initially created, but now our student populations have shifted. We have one of the most diverse student body populations in the history of the United States in our classrooms, but we have this same system we're trying to take them through. And as you stated, it's no longer, we can't just be good. We can't just teach good math, or I'm going to do the same thing. It has not worked, folks. It has not. Everyone wishes it worked, but I wish a lot of things, Rachel. I don't know about you. When you blow out candles on the cake every year, you wish something. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. So it's going to take some intentionality and some actions among us to dismantle this thing. And some hear the word dismantle, Rachel. I give this one in. They hear dismantle. Whoa, time out, pause. You're going to tear it down? You can do one or two things. You can dismantle it. You can disrupt it. But I think we need to agree it's not working. You have to do something about it. And it's not saying dismantle it, destroy it, and do nothing. Let's reimagine it. This is the perfect time when we're dealing with, in our lifetime, something none of us have ever dealt with. And I know all of us wish we never deal with this again. We have opportunities to be bold and make changes going forward. Think about why the toolkit was created, which Rachel said at the beginning. It was our need for change. Perfect timing during a pandemic to really rethink what is education. And I'm challenging our audience as we're rethinking, engaging within the toolkit, doing this dismantling, this reimagining, and thinking about these students who academically need different things happening in their classroom. Are we using this moment to change it, or are we going to use this moment when we go back in August and literally keep doing the same old, same old? at what point do we, Rachel, just say we have tools. That's why we're talking about Toolkit. You have a tool. We can't say we don't have a tool, but we can look in the mirror after you end this, everyone ends this night and say, what am I doing? What am I doing? As we think about what am I doing, and we think about the student populations, because a lot of folks believe, Rachel, we're focused on Black students, you're focused on LatinX students, you're focused on students who are multilinguals. So that must mean in this toolkit, it's going to teach us how to dumb it down. And I really want to jump into that question. We're going to get to Q&A, so make sure you're posting your questions to Q&A. But a lot of times I hear the assumptions made, if we're creating this equitable environment, we're not teaching math anymore, or we got to teach it for those kids, or we have to lower our standards. So jump into that a little bit, Rachel, as we get prime the pump for this Q&A. But are we talking about lowering standards or changing it totally for, I'm putting quotation, those kids? I don't think we are, but I want to hear from you.
No, thanks for raising that question. Not at all is the short answer. And, I was floored to hear that anyone could come away from this toolkit with that impression. On the contrary, like we had 3 kind of foundational principles and 3 foundational documents that we used. And like number 1 was that access to high quality grade level instruction and high quality materials should be universal. This is starting with everybody having access to the grade level standards. In California, we have our standards. Every state has their standards. That's like non-negotiable. What this toolkit is designed to do is to ensure that access is meaningful, that it's a tool to help teachers ensure that there's access to those standards. Because we know that we could say, yes, everyone should have access, all standards, all kids, but that's not currently happening. Our students are not having access to the level of instruction, the quality of instruction, the content of instruction that they deserve, that they have the right to. And so this is a toolkit that's designed to support teachers to have the scaffolding, to think about their lesson planning, to think about their own, their assumptions about what's the right way to teach and to interact with students and to really challenge those. So it's a tool to help teachers, to help all students have access to those high standards.
Help teachers, help ALL, all students.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces that you mentioned earlier, I want to go back to, you talked about culture. And as you read the strides, and I'm telling everyone, read through the strides, it talks about bringing students' culture into the mathematics environment. Imagine something for a minute. You all, I know we have a lot of dog lovers on here. Raise your hand, smile at me if you like dogs. A lot of folks. So think about a couple folks like, I can't stand dogs. Nothing against those folks. But if every day I taught mathematics, only talking about dogs, every single day, every book was a dog picture. It's great for some folks. They're like, I see Laura's raising her hand, loving dogs. I love it. We're talking about dogs every single day. But for kids that do not like dogs and can't associate with dogs, every day they're like, I don't see myself in this. Like, I know someone gets it. So I have to do one or two things. I got to assimilate and become a dog lover, or I could just step away and like, math is not for me. So now bring that into the terms of culture as we bring that into the classroom. Think about which students' cultures get brought into the classroom, which times when we're engaging with our students and you see students do something totally different. They're like, yeah, back home, this is how we did it. It changes an experience when I let everyone engage, and through a cultural lens, that is huge, because understanding mathematics, I love to study the history of math. And when you study the history of math, you realize every single culture in the world played a part in building mathematics education, played a part in building what we call mathematics. And if every culture contributed to it, it's our job now to continue that and unlock it and cultivate it with our students, as opposed to shutting it off and saying, no, Rachel, this is the line that we draw with math. This is math. This is our narrow little box. and we put math in the box, I think we miss out on the beauty of what mathematics is. Before we get to question and answer, we're going to drop in some questions. Vicky's going to come in from Student Achievement Partners and ask us some questions. I want to ask you this question. I was going to save it for the very end, but I want to pose it now because I really want folks to hear this. This toolkit, we scrape, like, I only think we scratched the surface. I think we literally read the cover page in our discussion, and we're going to do a couple questions. I just want to know, because I'm excited. I can't even wait to the end. What is next for this toolkit? What should we be looking forward to? I gave you some ideas right before we jumped on air about what I would like. I have my wish list, so let me know if I need to email you my wish list. But what is next for the toolkit?
Yeah, good question. I have my wish list too. But so when, our grant project and our funding, it was really to develop the resource, and then we kind of planned our dissemination strategy in a way that, like, we wanted to, like, plant as many seeds as we could, on fertile ground, and, like, bring the toolkit to folks as many as we could in our short, period of time that we had. And most importantly, to team up with communities of practice, networks, organizations that already convene teachers and do professional development and support districts. And so in California, we have like a statewide math community of practice, and they have really embraced the toolkit, and they're focusing on it all year, like digging deep into each of the strides. And that's great, because these are the folks who then are supporting districts and doing professional development for teachers in the field. And it's also a super like equitable model that there's representation all throughout our state on this community of practice. So that's like a key way that we are hoping that this will continue to grow, and that people will take it and adapt it and use it in a way that is meaningful to them, to push their conversations forward. We also know that many of our partners, so we have about like 30 plus dissemination partners in California that are taking pieces of the toolkit and integrating it with, some of them run communities of practice with district leaders. Some of them do professional development, targeting English language development teachers. And so, everyone kind of has their niche and their communities that they're adapting the toolkit for. So beyond this kind of initial dissemination that we're putting out in the world, we would love to grow the toolkit. So right now it has examples for primarily middle school. So I mentioned grades 6 to 8. And I think, just want to plug someone I think I saw in the chat, a question about like alignment with standards. And so while stride 1 is really about like this examining the white supremacy culture in mathematics, the other strides really go into more depth. Like they'll take one of those practices, like discourse in the classroom, and then they show a whole like approach to planning lessons, and there's some examples that align the math content standards, the standards for mathematical practice. Oftentimes there's also, in some of the other strides, there's alignment with California's English language development standards and social emotional development as well. So yes, it's all aligned with standards, but I'm getting off track here. So what we would really like to do is to build out this toolkit so that it includes examples from like pre-K all the way through college. And we've shared the toolkit with college professors too, and they're really excited. And a side note on that too is that they said a lot of the instruction that is being promoted in the toolkit is how mathematicians themselves engage with each other and how they, talk and get excited about like this world of math as being this very open kind of co-constructed subject. But then when we teach it, we kind of like narrow it again. And so I think it could be a very interesting tool to think about how we can bring some of how mathematicians themselves think about math and bring that into a more math classroom. So expanding the toolkit, K-12, and then we would also love to do the same for science. But this is all pending some funding proposals that we're working on.
I love my science folks. I love my other content areas. I am biased. We just want to know what is happening in math. We're going to drive this. Couple things. A lot of folks in the chat, because it says 6-8, a lot of folks get turned off with the grade bands. I've looked at this toolkit top to bottom. It can be used across bands. And I know everyone's waiting on the high school, everyone's waiting on the elementary version. This still works. Some get with the elementary, like it's talking about racism. Here's my motto. If kids are old enough to experience racism, we're old enough to engage them in things that can help create a more equitable society. So do not limit it because it says racism or it's 6-8. The structures within this are amazing. And also in the chat, you have to stick around to the end. This organization right here has something brand new that we're going to announce tonight at the end about what Student Achievement Partners is doing next with the toolkit. It is going to be amazing. That's all I can say. So stick around to the end. You only got a couple more minutes announcing something amazing as it relates to the toolkit as next step. We do have some questions, Rachel, that folks have been sending us. We're going to get through as many questions as possible. And Vicki is jumping in with us. And Vicki, are we just going to go down the line through them?
Yep. So what experience can we engage people in who aren't yet not acknowledging that these issues are legitimate challenges?
Oh, you started with a hard one, Vicki.
I love that question. Go ahead, Rachel. I want to talk about it too. Go Rachel.
All right. I think I would encourage those folks to, if the data are not convincing enough to point to a problem, that we have outcomes that are completely along race lines, primarily, other lines too, but like the biggest predictor is race. If that's not convincing that it's a problem, then I would encourage them to, if they have the trust and the relationships, to have some open conversations with students of color, with families of color. And if they don't have those relationships, then talk to organizations that do have those relationships and hear firsthand, how are our students of color experiencing mathematics? Do they feel that they belong? Do they feel heard? Do they feel that they're being included? Do they feel that they have agency over their learning? And by the way, I think a lot of white students also do not feel like they have a strong math identity or agency. And so, we are focusing on the students because we know that there has been disparate opportunities and outcomes, but really these practices of opening math to be a more inclusive, humane subject, it will benefit lots of students.
And you make a point about our white students. A lot of folks, once they see, or it says Black, it says LatinX, it says Multilingual. I don't have any of those. All my students are white. Every student deserves, as Dr. Gloria Latson-Billings puts it, they need to become biculturally competent. So don't look at this as, I don't have blank group. How are we making sure students can engage regardless and experience different cultures, experience different opportunities? Because as you step outside, depending upon where you're at, and when I say outside, not just outside your door, outside into the world is diverse. Students need to prepare for the world, and we're not preparing them. When we were growing up, it was like preparing for, hey, this society they live in, the world is flat now. We have to have that mindset. And then piggyback on Rachel, you start with the data. Like Jay-Z said it best, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Like, if you can at least acknowledge the data, how are we going to have a conversation? But then just figuring out what people like and just continually, I call it like if you're fishing, you keep putting out different bait just to see what they catch on, because eventually everyone gets impacted by racism at some point. Everyone gets impacted by white supremacy culture. So what we're trying to do is give you the tools before that happens. And the same thing when I have conversations with folks, I always say, I say it anyway. And folks like, you say it anyway, they don't care. I say it anyway because you can't unhear what you've heard. So say it anyway and keep saying it. Because again, going back to, it's about these students. It's about these students. Vicki, what else do we have? Going to number 2?
Yes, the questions get the upvotes.
Okay.
What steps can teachers take if they believe that the curriculum and books being used in schools are not decentering white supremacy?
If you know me, let me take a pause on that one. I'm going to say something. And I'm a math educator. I wear a lot of hats. And I actually like this question. You need to start questioning what materials you're using. If we, as math educators, as teachers, don't start putting pressure on adoption committees, don't start putting pressure on publishers, why would they feel the need to change for us? If when I spoke at NCTM a while back at Ignite, that was the first thing I call out publishers. I said, why are we publishers selling things by homogeneous authorship teams? The pictures don't reflect the students. None of the publishing corporations are reflecting students. Why are we continuing to support these things? Publishers, you have to force them to change. And it starts with you all as teachers, because if you think about it, it's a business. With it being a business, you got to demand some things. And if they don't have what you need, why are you continuing to support it? They're going to keep giving it to you. But if you start saying, look, I don't see my students representing these problems, I don't want this. If you start saying, why aren't your authorship teams more diverse? Why aren't your boards? Why aren't your organizations more diverse and reflective of students? They're going to have to change. But if you keep saying, oh, this is what we have, we just have to use it, your curriculums are not going to change. So I'm challenging the community, and I work in the publishing world, and I challenge the publishing world every day. I get into good trouble every day because I understand the power of a curriculum. I understand that how they can be changed to provide these opportunities. I have young kids, and I look through their curriculum materials. I'm like, dang, they don't see themselves all day or all year. And this unfortunate part, some places not even trying. So I'm putting the onus back on publishers that are listening. You need to do better, and you can do better. And if they don't do better, folks, the onus now is on you all. You can't keep letting it go. You can't keep saying, well, the standards align. It's not, that hasn't been working. Students have to see themselves in these curriculums. They have to feel a part of it. And not in these unauthentic ways, like authentically embedded within it. And that's where they come back to the circle from earlier. Every student should have access to the middle. And it's not hard to do if you have, as this tool was created in a short span, and it was created by a diverse authorship team. Publishers, ding, ding, ding. That's what you got to do. Rachel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in the short term, I think they're joining up with other anti-racist math educators and finding like other materials, alternative materials, and using those. I think this is an area that we actually think that there's a huge need. I mean, there's the quality is not there. In the longer term, I think figuring out like those issues about the demand, like creating that demand. One example, in California right now, we're revising our math framework. And we know that after this framework is adopted, and there's going to be a chapter that's instructional materials, guidance for publishers about instructional materials. And then after that, then there's going to be this whole curriculum adoption process in California. And so that instructional materials chapter in the framework is so important because that is what will guide a lot of that development. And so we have been pulling together all kinds of different organizations and advocacy organizations and parent organizations and English language development experts to provide input on the whole framework. But we're really focused on that instructional materials chapter. And actually tomorrow we have a meeting with a publisher who has been kind of following our advocacy and wants to know more about it. And so I think that's a really positive sign. But I think finding those opportunities, even though they're like really long term, those are like what I hope will be like a high leverage, high return type of investment in our time.
Last question. This is a quick one. I need the 30-second one because everyone's waiting on this announcement that's going to be life-changing. What are some of the reasons you chose to use the term strides? I honestly thought thinking about track, I was like, we're sprinting toward doing better. I totally don't think that's the answer, but I just thought that'd be cool. We in stride to do better, but why did we choose to, why was the term strides used as we wrap up today?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had like our internal project team, and we were having this meeting, and we're like, okay, so what should we call them? We're working with our designers, the folks that really helped make it look very beautiful, and they helped us with some of the language choices as well. And at first we were like, is it steps? We're like, no, because it's not like this isn't like a recipe. You know, we kind of got on this concept of the multiple on-ramps, that knowing that teachers, educators, like we're all on a journey and we're all in different places, and there could be different on-ramps. So it's not like a linear progression, but that each of the tools kind of moves you further along in your journey. And so it is kind of like this stride that you're on. So not too far off, Chris. Yeah.
So now everybody's gonna have that visualization of taking a stride. Now, give it up for Rachel in the chat. I want to thank you for hanging out with us at Coffee and Conversations. It has been a pleasure talking with you about the toolkit. I hope everyone goes to equitableMath.org. I want you all to overload the server, so it's like so many people going. We have to just keep getting larger server space. But we promised an announcement. Vicky, what about this announcement? This is exciting, Vicky. I'm going to the website now while you tell us about this. I'm going to the website. Go, Vicky.
Well, thank you, Rachel, so much for joining us, and Chris for moderating. Really enjoyed your conversation. And for everyone who participated, if you'd like to continue engaging with us, join us for part 2 of a Coffee and Conversations on April 14th, where we'll dive into the classroom applications for the toolkit. And we'll also be hosting a 5-part seminar series for those of you who can commit some more time to dive deeper into each of the strides. Also, this summer, we'll be offering an asynchronous course on Achieve the Core.
You better sign up fast for this 5-part series. Go to coreadvocates.eventbrite.com. It is going to max out quickly. You all are here tonight. I will go over to the website right now, and sign up for it.
That's amazing. I'm so excited to hear about those ongoing opportunities. And I really appreciate being invited to come have this conversation with you all today. And thank you all for hanging out on a Wednesday night. It was a pleasure.